I gave you some words last night, and I want to deal with them a little bit more. The words were compliment, number one, comment, number two, complaint, number three, criticism, number four, and contempt, number five. Contempt is one of the worst things that you can allow to exist in a relationship. Because contempt is not aimed at the situation, it's aimed at the person. Contempt is aimed at the person. And by the time contempt starts manifesting in a relationship, it's showing you that there's real subsurface issues. Now, what do I mean by this? Contempt is associated with belittling. It's associated with mockery. And it has no place. It's even associated with sarcasm. Sarcasm is a passive form of contempt. Sarcasm says, I can't say what I want to say to you because you're bigger than me, louder than me, a better talker than me. But I can say something sarcastically which has a subtitle of a dig. You know, if your big issue is over money, and one spouse is always hassling the other spouse about details, and you know you're always hassling about where's the money, or $3, or how much did it cost? It was $3. Well, was it $3 or $3.50? Well, it was $3.73, and you go through all this stuff, and then the spouse who's always nickel and diming makes an error. If you're not careful, you've built up such resentment that you'll say something sarcastic. Oh, so pennies don't matter now? You weren't talking about pennies. That was I finally get to hit you like I perceive you've hit me. And that is unhealthy for relationships. And that's not truth. But a lot of times, complaining, criticism, contempt are default ways of communicating where there's no tools. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say. So I go with what comes easy. Now, contempt is identified as one of the 7 things that indicate the greatest danger in a marriage. And they can actually predict, this is fascinating to me, they can actually predict with 80% accuracy whether or not a marriage will end in divorce based on how the couple fights. Predicted with 80% accuracy. Couples that can speak to the issue survive. Couples that can't leave the person alone and stay focused on the issue fail. Truth requires us to deal with it in love. I told you before, truth never comes alone. Truth alone is hurtful. Truth should always be accompanied by love, assurance, and acceptance. This is how I feel, this is what I see, but you as a person are not in question. But you listen to a couple and you try to get them to focus on the issue. The issue's about the money. The issue's about this. And they keep going this and going the other way about she hates or she's not or you're the worst. And they focus on the person. That relationship is really, really in trouble. And the reason we got to that point is lack of skill. You know, it's like a washcloth that sits curled up in a shower. And it gets wet, doesn't dry, and then gets a little more wet and doesn't fully dry, and then gets a little wet and doesn't fully dry. And you pick that thing up after a long enough process of that. Matter of fact, over a long enough time, you don't have to pick it up. It'll walk across the floor right there for you. And what happens? The water's not the damaging part. It's that if it doesn't completely dry out, it starts to stink. And conflict in a marriage, listen to me, that's like wet with water. It is there. But handling conflict in a manner that doesn't deal with the issue, but lets the issue sit unaddressed. You give it enough times of it not completely drying out, and that marriage will begin to stink. That friendship will begin to reek. Something will begin to grow and take on a life of its own. And most people freeze right here because they don't know how to talk to each other. We are weak in pointing out good, quick to point out bad, afraid to point out truth. And that's a bad combination. We're weak to point out good. I want you to think about how hard it is sometimes to say something nice. And it's a spiritual thing. Boy, I tell you, one of the easiest things in the world is to say something bad. Isn't it interesting how negative words just flow, but positive words, you have to summon them up? What does that tell you? You know, it's amazing. You sit down with a couple or with two friends and let them rattle off something bad about each other, and I mean, they can go and not take a breath. You say, before we end this session, I'd like to see if you can point out anything positive about this person. And I've actually had it said, I can't think of anything. Now, of course, that's not true. That's just a washcloth that sat for a long time.